Hello, everybody. Good evening. This is your teacher and fellow student, Heidi, and Rhonda is right on the other side of the camera. She has all of our definitions, and I have the other document from Claude, the one that did all that depth for me and analysis with me, for me. I don't know. I'm still working on my Claude language because Claude is not a person, but it's easy to talk about Claude as though Claude were a person. Claude does not think, does not notice. I mean, they call it thinking. I don't know. Claude synthesizes information and uses an algorithm to conclude. That's the best I can tell you. And it's so much more complicated. One of the things that we're going to be doing in here is learning AI, a lot of AI things, and learning what I've learned about AI. And I'll share many different things. Claude and I have had discussions about the limitations of Claude. Yeah, don't use Claude to do your writing for you. I don't deal with, with images and stuff like that in particular with the AI yet, because the generative stuff is irritating to me, and I don't want AI people and AI voices, and I don't want to have it pretend Obama voice. I don't like any of that. So that's not what I'm talking about. For me, it's more of Google on steroids kind of a thing. And so I just want to make sure, as some people are put off by the AI, that you have an idea of what I am and am not suggesting. So tonight we're going to be talking about connections and contradictions. If on the off chance the connections takes too long, we'll do contradictions next time. But I like the sound of connections and contradictions, so that's why I want to do them all. So the hidden connections, it was one of the questions I asked. I asked for Claude to do a deep dive into connections between and among some of the different governmental systems that weren't obvious, that we hadn't picked up on, that there wasn't a column for. And so hidden connections is how Claude decided to name it. And the first one is the legitimacy crisis connection, where Claude has pointed out that multiple systems are actually responses to legitimacy crises. Well, he has several examples, so let's go over them. The first is fascism. Fascism, again, being where the state gets involved in the capitalism and helps and abets the capitalists to exploit the population in order to make the money for the state actors and the capitalists. Is that good? Okay.
That's good.
Okay. Fascism is often a response to democracy failing economically. So if you think about the post-World War I German baskets of bills to go buy a loaf of bread stereotype, that's what Claude's talking about, I believe. The democracy is failing economically. Of course, you might blame the opponents of Germany for some of that, perhaps, but that's beyond the scope of this particular class. Most definitely with the democracy in Germany failing, though, it helped at least lead to the rise in fascism. Now I have a question then, Rhonda, maybe you know. Was Italy also having economic issues pre-Mussolini?
I'm not exactly sure.
Point for future. And if you can in another window, go for it. That would be kind of cool. I would just wonder, because that's the other, I guess we'd also have to look at Spain before Franco, no?
Yes.
If you don't mind, that would be awesome to know those answers if that was happening in Spain and Italy before the fascism. Okay, so then we also are talking about guided democracy. What's a guided democracy? That's where the powers that be are kind of pre-deciding, like legislators deciding who their constituents are going to be rather than the constituency deciding who the lawmakers are going to be. I think that has something to do with it, because it's guided democracy, not capitalism. So I'm going to have to say that it has a lot to do with controlling elections and things. Just stop me when you have an answer and then we'll go back, okay? Mm-hmm. So Claude is saying that the guided democracies come about in a response to democracies producing, Claude's quotes, the wrong results. So here I'm going to guess that if the constituency isn't going to vote in Putin, Putin's power structure is going to guide that election to indeed picking Putin. That's how I'm understanding it so far. So when you have people with strength and power and probably money, and they don't like what the democracy is doing and how it's voting, they might start taking over the means of decision making themselves and guiding the voters or the legislators to the correct decision. Did you find something?
I did find something.
Alrighty.
The rise in fascism in Italy seems not quite as big a response to economic failures as to people were discontent after World War I. Italy, they thought they should get a better position out of it.
So power more than money in this case.
Power more than money, and
pride, even national pride more than money.
Exactly, national pride is what they said. And the other big factor was the wealthy and the landowners feared socialism.
That's something that wasn't at this point put in here. The very way that strong, I want to say strong men, but I don't want to necessarily make it all about men, you know. Right. But how strong men made socialism an enemy in order to, but it is an enemy in a way. If you're a capitalist, it is kind of an enemy.
Exactly.
Because it says you can't be a capitalist, even though, well, they didn't call it that, but they sure did it anyway. Like in Russia, there were certainly these people that got very wealthy, maybe not because they had the means of production, but I think them too. Well, anyway. Did you find Spain yet, or?
Spain, again, it was not as much economic, national identity, and apparently there was a failed coup at some point, a military coup, and it failed, but then Franco came in to, be... to try and take power and also be the anti-socialism. And he got help from Germany and Italy.
Right.
To help defeat the free forces, and then became a fascist dictatorship. Right.
Right. So I forgot what I was going to say for a second. Oh, going to the Claude and AI thing is what I was getting at. That gives you one of the limitations of AI. Yes, Claude saw this and had this brilliant idea, but it takes for us to think past Claude, because Claude is, well, in that sense, kind of like a human, fallible. Just because Claude looks at all the, think about it. How many different entries in the internet have to do with fascism? The sheer volume and the sheer differences of opinions. Imagine you taking in all that information and deciding what you think specifically about fascism and a pattern you see. You're going to end up choosing some information over other information. Well, Claude's no different. So we do have to do our own research and our own thinking. Never let AI do the thinking for you. It can answer your questions. It's the same thing as like a calculator. You wouldn't know, if you read a word problem, you wouldn't know how to get the right answer on a calculator if you didn't know whether you were supposed to be adding or subtracting or whatevering in the problem. And it's the same thing. Claude's the same way. AI is the same way. If you don't know what it is you're doing and you don't know what you're looking for, some weird things can happen. For example, people using AI as a therapist. No, that's a bad idea, because if you're asking for things you don't know anything about, you have no way to check that. And then if it's about your psyche and things that you should do, no. They are not guides. They are not leaders. They are not there for your best interests. AI isn't like that. We'll talk about that more. Getting back to this, legitimacy crisis connection. So fascism can be a response to a democracy failing economically, but those hurt feelings, those lost cause and national identity feelings seem more universal.
Mm-hmm.
And when you look at this country, that's frightening a little.
Yes.
So, guided democracy, I think we covered. Then there's the technocracy. The technocracy, obviously ruled by either technocrats or worse yet, allowing the technology, the AI, the technology to make decisions. I don't know what I think is worse. They're both bad. But they're saying that that would come as a response to populist incompetence. So, which is kind of interesting because then Claude's implying that as people lose faith in people government and we're moving into the future, they may think that turning to technology is a good idea in one way or another. And I see where the technocrats are trying to make us think that, particularly with AI, but I don't think humans should ever turn over complete control to anything but humans if they can help it. Not until we have some life source that is benevolent and stronger or better, or I don't know. Not yet. The last one of the examples for this is the military junta, which, according to Claude, is a response to civilian government failure. Of course, in the eyes of the military, or whatever strong person comes along to guide the military. But still, I get it. In general, if one group that has power thinks that another group that is in control isn't doing a good job, they want to be able to either get rid of them or con them out of it or buy them out of it or force them out or whatever they want to do with it. I get that. And then the connection there, government or governance crises produce predictable system changes. That goes along with the idea that one kind of government kind of leads into another, which is something that we're building as a hypothesis, a Claude-driven hypothesis. We haven't decided yet if we are agreeing or not agreeing. We're exploring this thinking. The next one's a scale problem. This is fairly quick and even fairly intuitive. Direct democracy, like, it only works on small scale. Like, it's real easy. I'll give you a teaching example. If I had a reading group and I wanted to know which story we should read, it was pretty easy to ask each child and they would tell me and we would be able to choose a book real easily. Even in the classroom, raise your hands and count, and I could do a vote, and there are many things I could do as a direct democracy. We didn't do that as a whole school. We did not do that as a whole school. You might vote as a classroom and we'd send our class results. We'd have school government and each class would have a representative. So as soon as we had that many people, I don't even remember how many people, several hundred, 400 people, say 500 people, it was much more difficult to have direct democracy. So it works best small scale. Athens was able to do it. No, not all of ancient Greece. Athens did it. Swiss cantons, like the individual canton. A small town might be able to do that. The second one is a tribal or chiefdom system that basically works more in a family or kinship, clans and that kind of thing. But by the time you have 1,000 people, it's pretty difficult to have the kind of tribal situations they used to have. I imagine that if you want to do that, your chief starts becoming somewhat of a dictator, I guess. Now, then Claude contrasts with the idea of empire, which only works at a massive scale. Bookmark in that, because I have a comment. But the last one is indigenous consensus, where we talked before. In our last class, we talked about how those things are, that they're very durable and they work very well, but they're hardly considered by most people. They tend to work better on a small to medium scale, which explains part of why larger countries are not taking that as seriously. I guess you could do it with small groups, but you're going to end up then with a representative democracy, no matter how you do that. The bigger your group, the more representation. Okay. Now, I wanted to go back to that concept of empire, which only works at a massive scale. Think about, in terms of scale, think about being close enough to a blade of grass that you can see it clearly. And now imagine trying to get a sense of the whole meadow. You can't. How do you get a sense of the meadow? You stand up, maybe drift above the meadow, go a few hundred feet in the air. You can see the whole meadow. Now try to see a blade of grass. Well, you can't. So you can have a government that works for a few people and understand what those people need and have something that works for them, but you might miss a bigger picture. On the other hand, you could play like a game of Risk, have a big picture empire and move the pieces around, but you might not be able to care so much for the individual person. And that may be part of a problem with governance, that the scale is going to make a huge difference to what you can accomplish. Next one. Claude calls this the resource curse. Again, this is fairly quick. He talks about 3 examples, and I just found this I did tell him to look for hidden connections and things, and things I wouldn't have noticed. He found this one. He says, I'll see if I can say this right again. I think I didn't before, because I wanted to say Emirati, but it's an emirate. I guess it would be right, an emirate and a sultanate. Yeah, the Gulf oil states. That Claude is implying that the excess of oil has corrupted these governments. Then a kleptocracy, which is the concept of states that are involved in resource extraction, probably other people's resources that they're trying to extract for themselves, thus kleptocracy, rule of the thieves, rule by theft. I wish there wasn't a piece of that reflects on us a little bit, but I kind of see where we have been a bit of a kleptocracy and still are trying to be. Maybe even he's trying more again. I don't know. The third one, you think?
I think so.
Claude talks about the narco state, which is a fairly entertaining thing to happen right now while Trump and Hegseth are talking about narco terrorists, right? But the narco state is a drug production region. China's huge, so I'm sure it's not the entire thing, but apparently there's some. And of course, we're looking at Central America and stuff like that, a narco state. So because of some natural resource wealth, certain government situations can become corrupted. And that makes me wonder about if you have a huge country with lots and lots of different types of resources, are you more corrupted? Are you less corrupted? That would be a point of discussion for another time. I quickly can see either way. Like, if you have lots of different resources, you might be too busy just living life and not worrying about trying to steal from others. But on the other hand, if you have so much, you might kind of feel entitled and feel like the one thing you don't have, you get to just go take. So, yeah. All right. We ready to move on? You good?
I'm good.
The failed state trajectory. The failed state trajectory. This is where, some of these are where I start to get into that idea of the rocks. The rock cycle. That's a better word. So, the failed state trajectory. Claude has theorized that there's a clear progression from a hybrid regime, meaning somewhere between some free market and controlled socialism type market. You still call that a market?
Well,
I guess it sort of is, because if you have a free market, you could have a not free market.
right.
Controlled market.
Controlled market.
Okay, so you have a semi-controlled market, hybrid regime. Remind me, please, what anocracy is?
Anocracy.
Is it just confusion?
Let's see. Mixed democratic, autocratic.
Oh, so what you're saying is first your economics gets kind of mixed up. And then once that happens, you start getting more autocratic tendencies in your democracy. And that, he says, leads to warlordism. Now, I don't know about that. I'm taking some exception there. You start mixing up your rules about money and start controlling it And that would get into your government becoming less democratic. That makes sense and follows to me. How we go from there to warlordism, though, I don't know. Because that's like Afghanistan.
Right. I think there's more of a breakdown of central authority.
So I guess what he's saying is not that this is just going to lead to this, but if you keep going down that path, you would get there. All right, I could buy that a little more. And then you get into anarchy, but I tend to think once you've got warlordism and you've got these strong people and their weapons, it would be awfully hard to break it down further into anarchy. I get that he thinks that's a logical progression, but not a practical progression, maybe.
Maybe, yeah.
Claude does say as a connection that state failure has predictable stages. So just again, the whole idea that one kind of government, if it's stable, it's stable. But if it isn't stable, will it wobble this way? Will it wobble this way? Will it wobble this way? And maybe there are some predictable wobbles.
Right.
How's that?
Right.
The final connection that Claude has put here is the colonial legacy. Stopping myself for just a second to remind you, if you want these resources, they're in our description, so you can look at these documents yourself. So some systems are often imposed by force. Federalism, a presidential system, and parliamentary democracy. Essentially, what Claude is implying is that the United States and the UK, in their colonial horrors, have pushed federalism or presidentialism or parliamentarism or whatever, all governments that didn't fit their values or their traditions or their culture all over them. And that those tend to fail. They either they're reflecting a colonial legacy and therefore kind of, I don't know, probably don't resonate as well with the people, or maybe just aren't as stable, or they have been taken over by other things because they don't fit with the people. I don't know if I said anything important there. Either they have them or they don't. That was good. Do you have anything you want to add about any of these connections?
Well, I thought you had an interesting point about the, when we were talking earlier about federalism being imposed on the South.
Oh, that's right. You want to say it or you want me to say it? Okay. I had said earlier when we were preparing for this that when we had our Civil War, the Southern states felt that the United States then turned around and imposed its government and values and everything on it. And in a sense, it became like a colonial system where it had something imposed on it and it's still chafing.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Still chafing.
Still chafing. Okay. Contradictions. Let's see. There are 4 specific contradictions. And so I'm going to give you the 4 and then we'll go over them just a bit. Try not to take quite as long with this section. One is the capitalism and democracy tension. Another, representation versus scale. The third, efficiency versus liberty. And the final is equality versus freedom. The reason why I want to do these a bit quickly right now is because each of them is probably worthy of its own video. But we'll make sure they make sense. So capitalism and democracy. Let's think about how that works. What is capitalism? Capitalism is a way of making sure rich people get to do what they damn well please with their money and their property. That's what it is. That they get to use it any way they want to buy whatever they want, to make more money with it, to buy political power, to buy attention, to buy ballrooms. I mean, to buy, and democracy needs for everyone to have an equal voice. And you can see this. This is the tension we're dealing with right now in this country. So much. The capitalists are saying, stop regulating us. We get to do what we want with our money. And the workers are saying, stop exploiting us. We're important people too, and we have rights. And it's just, and that's very simple. I said it in a super simple way. The contradiction, They're actually at odds. When I was a kid, I was taught that we were we were capitalists and we were a democracy, and those were the best things to be in the world. And nobody ever told me that they were actually at odds. Nobody ever told me that, well, they did say we were a republic. I'll give them that. But they sure didn't say that capitalists frown on democracy, which is what it seems like now, at least. All right, representation and scale. A representative democracy solves the scale problem we talked about with the direct democracy. If you can only do a direct democracy with, like, say, 1,000 people, and that wouldn't be easy. Like I said with the classrooms, if you have a classroom rep from each place, that solves that problem, but creates distance from the citizens, and distance enables the elites to capture it. And I think that that is another way of saying what we've been saying. If you're not careful, representative democracies start becoming mixed in ways that lead to authoritarianism if you let it go there. And the contradiction is each solution creates a new problem. And that's how you have that cycle of governments, potentially. Ugh. Then you have efficiency versus liberty. This is some of the difference between China and the USSR, the way it had been more, and Singapore versus the way that the Western values tend to be. Do you stop all crime and have a surveillance state and an authoritarian regime? Very efficient. Or do you allow for the mess of democracy, knowing that some criminals are going to be free and some crimes are just going to happen? Do we whip people so that we have no spitting on the streets? Do we allow for some spit and make sure nobody's ever whipped? I don't know. I mean, I know what I think, and I know what we used to think here. Crises often favor efficiency over liberty. So that's why you see this administration creating all these false catastrophes and emergencies and crises so that they can insert their strongman tendencies. That's what it's all about. I'm positive. And people want both. People want the efficiency, but they want their freedoms and their rights and their voting and their choices. And it doesn't work like that. It just doesn't work like that. Final one. The last thing for tonight. Equality and freedom. Equality and freedom don't go together either. Bundle of contradictions. If everybody's free, that means the creeps are free, doesn't it? If the creeps are free, that means that they're going to make sure things are unequal, especially the creeps with power. But if we stomp them and don't let them do their thing, we might have a certain amount of equality, but then we're not going to have any freedom. They won't. Who gets freedom? Who decides? Aren't these some of the big questions? What freedoms are realized by whom? Who makes the rules? Who decides? And we want it to all be free, but we can't, because then you'd have an anarchy, which doesn't work, because then you have the strong idiots taking over. So these are the contradictions and problems. This is why we're having a hard time. This is why things weren't as stable as we thought that they ought to be, because we haven't solved any of these things, and we must. So that's what we have for you for tonight. You can see that this particular segment has a lot of places to go. Right now, like I said, we're hitting like a high school bachelor's degree, kind of a level. When we come back to revisit these and tear it apart and debate and have other people talking about it and examples and maybe theses, not feces, theses, opinions, hypotheses, theories, then we'll be hitting more of a master's level of work. How much of that we're going to do, I guess we're going to see, because it's really going to depend a lot on you. So I hope you come back again. Thank you so much.